Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Hi, my name is Om Puran and I work as a marketing director with Square Systems, and I'll be your host and presenter for today. I have with me Mr. Jeff Friedman, who is the Vice President for Customer Success and Delivery with Square Systems, and he would be interviewing our guest speaker, Mr. Chenu Thong, the Managing Director of WEM APAC. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. All participants will be on a listen only mode. If you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll answer them up during the Q&A session. A recorded version of this webinar will be available and shall be shared with all participants in few days. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into our topic. Now, our topic today is RPA, Digital Workforce for Digital Era, a strategic look at best practices. In this session, we are going to give you an insightful look at best practices for using robotic process automation, or the RPA, as your digital workforce and take your business into the future. RPA has been a major player in the automation of processes. Well, today we discuss on how businesses are using this for success. In the meantime, we are not going to talk to you about and educate you on something you know, but we'll try to bring some points to your consideration that you may not be aware of. And one of them begins with why RPA is so attractive. Now, here are some reasons why RPA is so attractive. And these are probably things you already know. Let's say the reduction of operational cost. We all know that robots never go to sleep. They have the ability to grow into an infinite volume and shrink to fit with the business needs. What we are going to be talking about is how the majority of RPA has been built on these and has increased their overall effectivity in ways that no one would have imagined when RPA first came out. And we are going to talk more about these things in subsequent slides. Now, let's see how it all evolved. If we look back at time, the introduction of RPA really happened during 2010 to 2013. And during this time, actually, it started to come on its own. And this initially started with simple automation of manual processes. And now we have entered into the age of cognitive RPA. And the term, this is the term that describes the use of algorithms and other systems to do more than workflow management. And, we can see the stuff like autonomous language processing, NLP, machine learning. And these are the things which are making this generation of RPA more advanced than before. And putting it all together, we get into the modern concept of RPA. Okay. Now, this is how it has evolved over the period of time, and this technology is further expected to evolve even further with more innovative RPA solution are being predicted to emerge. Now, as you think about where RPA has gone and what we just talked about in terms of where it is going, you're seeing the evolution of how the industry is learning to use it, and in combination of in combination with other capabilities to create more value. Let me give you an example in this regard. Now, you can see this is this is one of the most common scenario of code to cash, or you can call it order to cash process. Now, here in this slide, you can see in this typical case, so there are multiple, this particular business process is a combination of multiple steps, teams, applications,
and sub processes. Now, all of these in a combined fashion, if they are working, it would normally take somewhere around 30 days to complete the overall process. But when we are bringing RPA onto the picture, and just by bringing the automation, you can get this down by uh, let's say maybe by 5 days. So that is more or less that is going to happen. Now this actually um, tells us the possibilities with the adoption or with the inclusion of RPA. Now, let me give one more example where you can see what you are seeing right now is a picture from a commercial for St. Jude Children's Hospital, where the hospital is trying to seek donation, and they have placed this QR code on the screen, and this is actually a TV commercial. Within the commercial itself, you can see the QR code. Now, the idea is that they are now starting to place the QR codes within the ads, and they're doing it to make it very simple for people to do the donations. And their viewers can now scan the QR code and make the donation directly while watching the commercial. Now, let's imagine of what may be happening in the back end while processing that particular transaction. Well, uh, we can go back to the use case that I just showed you, and let's do a backend, or imagine the backend happening by introducing the bot into the picture, and let the bot do the transaction and process it. Now, instead of all of the manual activity that would typically have to happen in the traditional world, the QR code transaction to a bot process can be super fast. Now you see that this is done in a very quick fashion. Now that's the interaction of digital transformation, and that is the beginning of the introduction of what we call the intelligent automation. Now, let's talk about how the real world is starting to recognize this. Now, within the real world, executives would be interested, or they would be talking about realizing the power of intelligent automation. Well, there are quite a bit of a data around which can act as proof point of the fact that intelligent automation and RPA are being widely recognized. Now you see more than half of C-level executives are using intelligent automation to augment certain key operations. More than 90% of the C-level folks can attest to the fact that how their organizations are performing above the average in managing the business trends, and they are also gaining somewhere around 4 times of return on their RPA investment. Now, that is the reason why the whole industry is seeing such profound growth and potential for RPA, because of its much because it is much more than just simple replication of human processes. And this you know would certainly uh, tell us, why it has become that popular. Now let's get into let's look at how RPA is incorporated into intelligent automation. Now, in the previous slides, as we discussed the RPA, which is basically process of automating the manual and repetitive task to bring in more efficiency. Now, the intelligent aspect of RPA was possible by bringing in the robots into picture. So I had briefly touched upon it in one of the previous slides. Now, let's examine it further. Now, robotics, artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies carry out human actions and act independently by making decisions or interpreting the data without direct human interference. So, IPA not only mimics the human action, but it can also learn to, better them over the period of time. And typically, it uses, all this four technologies of machine learning, NLP, intelligent workflows, and the base RPA thing. And intelligent process automation, you can call it as a upgraded format of RPA. Now, unlike the RPA, intelligent process automation can understand the context, and it can learn, and it can iterate, and it can handle both structured and unstructured data while supporting some level of informed decision making. Now, these are some of the areas where it stands better than the traditional or the classical RPA. Now, in this slide, you can see the you know the basic. I mean, we have already examined the basic difference between the classical RPA and the IPA. Now, the question is, what would be a best fit for a certain business case, or for your organization? Now, it all depends. Now, it all depends on the business needs. While IPA, or the intelligent process automation, would be a next level upgrade to RPA, allowing it to handle more complicated process and accommodate more measurable decision making ability. But RPA can certainly be adopted or placed um, in scenarios which are repetitive and rule based. Now, these are the basic differences, and it all depends on the context. There would be scenarios which can be fulfilled by considering the classical RPA, and there can be scenarios which are much more advanced and complex, where you can place IPA into action. Now, with this, let's examine, or let's bring in the fact how to become successful within RPA. Now, we have talked about the key processes of RPA and IPA, but at the same time, I would say that we are not. As I said before, that we are not here to educate you uh, stuff that you already know. We're here trying to give you insights into what we think is important, and why RPA is not necessarily being successful for all users, and as it should be. And as I talk about how it has got the potential, and its potential is also growing exponentially, and how you want to be a part of that, you know just not because it's just a hype and a buzzword, and you just want to get into it because others have also jumped into it, but actually there should be a proper case or proper need of understanding the importance, and getting into it. Now, IPA being intelligent process automation, uh, but what are we going to talk about uh, in subsequent slides would be is actually a perspective as to why RPA implementations, are not successful, and why they don't provide the right kind of return on investment, which the companies or the firms or the businesses, they expect when they are uh, getting into it. And what are some of the, we just, in the subsequent slides, will share some of our key observation in this regard. Now, you can see here, these are a few of the function agnostic scenarios. Now, these are some of the things you may have observed. You see that organizations do not realize the complexity of the use cases. Now, what you see are typical use cases which can be put into any industry. Now, again, I mean, you can ask me, they are getting applied to, I mean, they can be simply plug and play, and you can apply them into any scenario, and they can be very straightforward. Let's say recruitment is under human resources, and there are stuff like training and development and payroll and so, and you do also have order to cash, or credit card, for instance, or a contract to order process. Now, when you look at all those things from a isolated process perspective, they may appear to be seamless and very straightforward, and they may actually work. But now, if you are picking them out and then introducing them into different industry scenarios or industry group, I mean, under ideal circumstances, they may not work well. That has been our observation. Now, in this slide, you can see some of the core industries, and we are trying to examine this from a context of putting them into various industry brackets. Now, while doing this, you start to quickly realize that, you know, this is not all the same, because industries are not self contained. Now, let's say within life sciences, you will find components of manufacturing, and you can also have components of, say, financial services, and you can also have components of, you know, let's say a BPO would be something which is pretty, cross and which has got a cross environmental perspective, and you can find it everywhere. And maybe, I mean, same can go ahead with public sector, and there are pieces of telecom and as well as insurance. You know, so there are no clear cut isolated environment. Now, this is when you start to think about, I mean, this is where, if you're thinking to implement the RPA, you'll have to also consider what is in those use cases that you are going to begin with, and where are you going to, to be like the one of the saying that begin with the end in mind, and how are you going to have your organization, you know how you can make your organization successful in regard to this, and what are your key strengths as well as weaknesses while implementing them. Now, these are some of the things which may hunt your mind while you are looking at these cases. Now, you need to decide if you want to have this as an investment that you feel is core to your business process, and therefore you want to develop the capabilities in house, or you're going to use this as a service that you want to consume through consultancy, or even as a managed service. So let's talk a little bit, you know, more about the various ways of approaching this. Now, if you're going to do this as a core competency, then you'll have to think of certain, then you'll have to consider certain questions. Now, do you have the right resources available in your organization who are able to do this? Do you have the right, capability of hiring the right set of people, and you have the all the good time of the world to train them? And again, I mean, do you have have the patience and the interest to keep investing on this, so that it doesn't become another project, and it acts as a back burner while you have certain other priorities or important activities or things to do. And if you're going to go ahead and invest in this as a core competency, do you have the executive support to do this? Do you have the budgetary investment to make it right? And do you have the right processes or the mechanism to track and measure these activities? So all these things would be some of the key questions that you may have to look at. Now, with all these things, um, I mean, you can see all of these various cases, uh, which would certainly, uh, give you an idea of various use cases which are there. Uh, and at the same time, you can ask yourself all those key questions on, how to do it in an efficient way, you know and how to make a proper uh, investment. Now all these reasons might be considered while taking up a call on the type of model you want to choose. Now when we are talking about, I mean, we need to also look at something like a managed services model that I mentioned or referred in my previous slide, um, where no as I scan through all of these key cases. So I'm just trying to put my thought process on a model which may be applicable to your situation. Now based upon that, let me just cite an example of, not example, a scenario of a managed service model. Now this is a model that can be adopted, where we bring in the expertise across all of the industry groups, not just the functional use cases. And um, and we have got the people who have done it, who have done the bots in various industries. And we also have the experience of doing bot development across all those typical functional cases, and the ones which you are just now seeing. Now in this way you have, you get the you get the best of both the worlds, and you have the right set of people to do it, and they can come with the right set of questions, and they can, they can get up and make you run along with their experience. Now these are some of the things we may urge you to think about as you might be considering on how you want to get it done and scale it up successfully. Now, you can maybe take an approach by beginning it with a simplistic script-based replication of the human processes. So, with a the base RPA activities, and you can also go up the way to a maturity level where, you can you have the the resources to implement intelligent process automation in the form of achieving digital transformation at the backdrop. Now I guess this has been these were my slides, and with this I turn over to our Vice President of Delivery and Customer Success, Jeffrey Friedman, who's going to have a fireside chat with Cheno Thong, the Managing Director of WEM APAC. Thank you so much, and over to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Om. So, Cheno, you and I have known each other for quite a while. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for giving us some of your time. Let me just give a quick introduction of your background to the audience. You started your career with HP back in 2000. In the last 20 plus years, you've held a number of progressive leadership roles, now culminating with your starting WEM APAC in 2018. So again, thank you very much for your time and for being here.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, I think great presentation, Om. I think you've set the base really, really well. So I'm looking forward to this chat.
Thank you, Cheno.
Cheno, we want to talk about your experience with RPA and how you came to decide to incorporate that into your offerings. But before I start with that, just to set some background for the audience, can you briefly tell them what WEM is?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Yes, so what we do is that we are in the space of digital transformation and in a space where we want to accelerate the business velocity of customers. So what we do is that we bring a toolbox or a portfolio that can accelerate the building of applications. So with WEM, it's the only enterprise application development platform where you can build complex application without coding. And we are really excited to see the level of adoption among the large enterprises.
Very, very interesting. We're going to have you back and talk a lot more about WEM. But let's stay on topic. You went through a very extensive process in deciding to add RPA as a service offering to your partners, such as S-Square. And I'd like you to talk to the audience a little bit about what did you learn through that process?
Thanks, Jeff. And maybe I'll just share our objective. Like automation is a no-brainer, right? Anyone knows that that will help. But when we delved into RPA, so we looked at two things. One is the vendors, the other is the experiences of the customers. What we found from the customer side was that all the people are excited about RPA. The level of satisfaction from the projects were quite low. In fact, at that time, around 70% of the customers were not happy with the RPA deployment. That's a very high number, and that was a big eye-opener for us because the whole market is talking about RPA, and here you are, you talk to 50 customers, 70% of them are not happy. And we delve into the reason, and we'll go a little bit more into that as well. We delve into the reason, and what we found out was that one, they were expecting too much from the project, or they've been promised a lot. And secondly, they're doing it themselves, or a partner of an existing vendor is doing it for them for the first time. So the frustration is that those they don't know the business processes, and here they are trying to do it for the first time. They're not getting the support, and they're already expecting a lot from the return from that project. And a combination of all that was actually causing this huge customer dissatisfaction. And on the vendor side, if you just go and search, you'll find that there are hundreds of vendors, everyone claiming that they can do this, they can do that, and it's almost similar messaging. So we had to crystal down. So we have a bunch of customers who are not happy with RPA based on our experience. And then we have a lot of big players. Of course, there are 3 big names, and then a number of hundreds to follow them. And what we looked at was RPA without the intelligent piece is very easy to measure. So you look at the speed. How fast can the bot go? And there are sites like rpachallenge.com. You can go and have a look there. So the speed of the bot, and then you look at, of course, the cost. The commercial is important, but also we look at the supportability. In fact, can we learn from every development? Can we make sure that the knowledge from one project is passed on to the next project, so that we have a fully managed offering? And yes, if a customer wants, we can train and do other things, but we have an option of a fully managed offering where knowledge from previous projects are passed on to the next one. So it's growing, better deployment every time, more learning every time, and where we can also have what Om rightly pointed out, the industry knowledge built within that. That is one side, and also we are dealing with enterprises. So it's very important that we can deliver to our SLA, and that this RPA is constantly, technology is constantly improving, so that there is investments to constantly improve the technology, and that RPA is core of the company. So putting all these parameters in place, we sign up our partnerships, and we are now global distributors for Akabot. We found that they met the criteria, and yes, and we're having a really good success in America. Like I say, yeah, the win rate is very, very high.
That's very exciting, Chano. Thank you for explaining that. Now, you're actually in Australia, correct?
Correct. Yeah, beautiful city of Melbourne.
It's wonderful down there. I'm looking forward to getting down there soon. But how is COVID affecting Australia? I mean, we know it's a pandemic around the world, and it's changed so much worldwide. How's Australia dealing with it?
I think every state is dealing it separately. So the state I'm in, Victoria, is not handling it that well, but the rest of the states are handling it really well. Unfortunately, they've locked down a lot of things, but that has actually been the fuel for even RPA projects where a lot of things have to be done, what we call no contact banking, no contact processing of invoices. So, yes, so a lot of lockdowns, but it's actually technologies like RPA is actually helping the economy to keep moving. So.
Yeah, and you know, from our perspective here in the States, we went through obviously in 2020 where organizations, because of COVID, were having to unfortunately let go of people or let them on leave, and they still had the functionality that they had to support. So you know, if they had bots in that situation, they would have been good, right? Now we've got the switch situation where thankfully the economy is starting to come back in 2021, but we can't hire people. There's a tremendous shortage of resources available. So again, the companies are trying to grow. They need this functionality serviced. And again, this is an opportunity for a bot in my perspective. How are your conversations with customers replicating that or maybe contrasting with that?
See, well, maybe there is a bank, for example, and the COVID impact on a number of countries in this part of the world has been quite hard. But with that bank, they identified around 70 processes initially as this rolled out. As this is a company strategy. Initially to identify the tasks, and I think I use that as a good playbook for adopting RPA. So it's a top-down where it's a said, yes, we will get our employees to do creative thinking, and we will have a category where there is this software FTEs that are doing the manual task automation, intelligent automation. So the first base is, and in the task automation itself, there's a lot of processes that can be done. Invoice, purchase, employee, and I think Om has talked a lot about it. So they identified 75 processes. And when COVID hit, the advantage was that most of the processes were in. When COVID hit, they just had to accelerate the adoption. Now the things have dialed down, but as more businesses comes, it's just an addition of one more bot, and the whole thing is done. So, and the first is the cost, but also, like you said, the pace at which you can add an FTE, software FTE, we call it, and then the quality of the employee. Like there's no training period. The employee comes and then they start doing the thing at that 100% accuracy day one, the minute one, right? So one is time, cost, but also quality, where you look at it as a low-level software FTE that is coming and performing at 100% of exactly what you want him or her to do from day one.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this customer have now gone up to 120 bots.
Wow.
Working 24/7, yeah.
Wow. I could ask a ton of more questions, but I'm being gently prodded to remind me that we want to leave some time for questions from the audience. Chenno, I know you're real busy, but would you be able to stick around for some questions?
Happy to.
Great. Om, let me give it back over to you, and let's take some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks, Chenu, for sharing your insights. We have a couple of questions. Okay, the first question that we have, it is for Jeff. So it says, what would be a typical time frame for implementing a bot use case?
So obviously, as Cheno talked about, it can happen very differently depending on the use case complexity, the number of bots involved, the maturity of the organization, et cetera. I'll give one answer, and Cheno, please jump in as well. You heard Cheno talk about Akabot. That's one of the offerings that we are taking to market through his distributorship. And what we found is that you're talking about 4 to 6 weeks to identify the use case and to do the business case analysis to justify moving forward with a implementation. And then you're talking about 4 to 8 weeks to actually do a full implementation, get up and running. So you're really talking about 2 to 14 weeks, some period of that time frame to get everything up and running. In contrast, what I've seen and heard is you're talking about at least the better part of 10 to 20 weeks in the normal course of action. And a lot of times RPAs using the traditional big names, just the pilots alone are taking 4 to 6 months. And the reason for that is because the customers are not being guided in terms of the right use case to pursue. They don't have sufficient information to allow for the adaptation and the incorporation of it. And they're just being sold over expectations, making it too complex a project. Cheno, what are your thoughts on this as well?
You're spot on. The advantage where we have a managed service option is that if it's a very simple use case and we have done it somewhere else, we can leverage from there and then bring that up fairly quickly. So we have cases where we have done, say, for example, employee onboarding or some HR pieces that is done in days. So we did one for one of the big Japanese firms where it was bringing data from one system to an SAP. And because we have done similar things, we could do that in 2 weeks. So there is knowledge, which that is for task automation. For intelligent automation, or what we call it, I would put it mainly in terms of classification of documents and data extraction of documents. That's where most of them would fall. That is where I would highly recommend that we do a proof of concept before you actually go into the bigger deployment. Because when it comes to AI, ML, at times it takes time to train, but also the quality of the scan of the document makes a huge difference in the timelines. Say if there's a color, if there are blank pages that the AI has to recognize, and if it's a credit card and the credit card is filtered and scanned, so that training period can be more. So I would highly recommend to do a POC. And once you do a POC and you say we're getting an accuracy of 90 plus, then we're good to go. That deployment can be very fast.
Thank you, Cheno. What other questions does the audience have?
Yes, I have one more question. I guess it's addressed to me. So, what are the different types of bots which are used in RPA process? So, let me answer this question. Now, we have different varieties of bots, and the most common ones can be chatbot, so which is we all know it's pretty common, and it is something that simulates a human-like conversation with the users via text messages or a chat window. So that's one of the most common format of bot. And then Chenu also mentioned about the taskbot. Taskbot, again, these are the ones which automate the rule-based and the repetitive tasks, and the areas can be numerous. And further to these, we have the meta bots, which are like the automation building blocks. We have the IQ bots, which are advanced and they can perform tasks in accordance to certain highly advanced cognitive instruction or cognitive technology. Now, these are the various type of bots I have heard of. So, Chenu, you may, if you want to add of anything, Jeff, feel free to do that. So, I guess this is the last question.
I think we're good for right now.
Yes.
Let's see if there's any other final questions, and then I think we should probably go ahead and wrap up.
Right. We don't have Yes, so these were a couple of questions that we had from the audience, and I guess it's time to wrap up. So, over to you, Jeff.
So again, I'd like to extend our sincere appreciation to Cheno, Managing Director of WEM APAC. Your insights and your time is very much appreciated, and I think our customers got a lot out of it as well. Om, thank you very much for putting this together and facilitating and hosting this. Very insightful and thought-provoking. To everybody in the audience, thank you for your interest and your time. We will be following up with copies of this recording for your further consumption and sharing it within your organization. And we hope that you'll give us a chance to have a deeper conversation with regards to your interests and needs in RPA. With that, thank you very much. Operator, go ahead and close down the call.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Om.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.